Well, the day started out real nice. All stoked, getting ready to do the deal here, close it out, and didn't go as smooth as I wanted it to, but it got done. I'll share the details in the video here. Also want to mention, I know this is a long video. There's just different parts of this video are going to be of interest to different people. So I'm kind of sharing everything here at once, and I know I'm sure a lot of you scroll on through certain parts of it where others are gonna want to focus on certain parts. So just trying to cover as much as I can while I'm doing it. Just doing some final things before I get ready to close this out. Here's what all of the internals are looking like. I plan to run this servo for the aileron and possibly for this inboard. This is like a middle surface here. I probably won't be flying with this one, but we'll have some full trailing edge control in case we want to use camber or something like that, or it'll help me dial in crow for landing, and it may be used for landing, not sure yet. But I think I can fit a 6130 in here once I get the tabs off, and another 6130 for the flaps. And this 18650 cell, this is not the one I'm using, it's just out of a flashlight, but just fits in this corner. But I can't fit another one any further down, and I can't come this way either, I don't believe. We'll find out. I can do some more measuring, but depending on how heavy it is, if I were to put two batteries here, I'll put my receiver over on this side and a switch, I'll end up having to add some lead over to the other side. So the trade-off is adding some weight, but I'll still need an extension, or just build the pack where I've got one cell. I'll have a small hatch cut out right here on each side, and I figured I could build the pack. I'm gonna have to run wire through here, across, and back through here. So I'm gonna punch a hole right through here, and then these ribs have holes for the servo wires to go through. So the plan is to put one cell over here on the left, run an extension across, and another cell over there on the right. Because this weighs nothing. And that way we're relatively balanced. I'm going to go around this flange. I'm gonna knock down any material that's up on it that's not just the paint and fiberglass. So like all of this tape is gonna come off that are covering the holes. That thickness there, I'll have to use a razor blade and slice because there's fiberglass onto it. And I'm gonna sand areas that have carbon, like there's not a lot of carbon, but here's a little bit of carbon up on the edge here. So this will all get sanded off. And then over here, there's a fair amount of carbon up on the flange. So I'll work all the way around that. A lot of this stuff, as long as it's flat, it's fine. It flakes off because there's nothing supporting it. It's just painted on the tool, and the paint's not strong, obviously. Back here, there's fiberglass. There have been times where I just take a razor blade and score this and pull everything off the outside. I like to leave this paint on because it protects the mold from epoxy getting on it. Epoxy sticks to the mold a lot better than paint, and so this is almost like a protective barrier. Obviously, it gets chipped off during all the processing, but I'll make all the alignment pin areas look like this, and then I'm gonna just sand all of this as smooth as I can get it, and I'll make sure that there's nothing on here. And on the opposing tool, I need to clear this area. I should have put some flash tape on this back edge. It's not a big deal that this will come right off, this paint. So I'll have to scrape and clear that off and do the same process around this flange. For the nose, so there's no joggle tool that's been on this. The wing is thin enough to where a bead of epoxy along this leading edge, I mean, you still would want a joggle tool if you can. A joggle tool would have clamped onto this, and when I did the layup, this fabric, the skin fabric, would have wrapped up into the underside of the joggle tool, and the joggle tool is an offset of that the bottom airfoil over there. So we don't have that, and these small airplanes don't really have them, but I think a lot of us have cracked leading edges open, and they probably wouldn't have broken with if they were lapped over. But I'm okay with this. It's pretty, there's gonna be a nice bead of epoxy in here, but getting up into this area, there's not a good place to put a bead, so it's not the best solution, but it works fairly decent, is to take a backer rod, a foam backer rod, and I pull a carbon sleeve over that, and I pull it tight, and I'll CA the ends, and it's just a flexible carbon sleeve, and I'll tack it like right in here somewhere to where it's just barely proud of the flange, and it's cushy, right? It's soft, and it'll run all the way about to the nose on both sides, and I'll just stop it right around in here, somewhere in here. And I just tack it with CA, and then I'll wet it out. Before I close the tool, I'll wet it out really good. I'll put a bead of epoxy up under the underside of it. And then when it gets a bead, in between there and on top. And then when I close out, it'll mate up with the other side, and it'll at least kind of help bridge these two together. This is really shallow here too, so it should, it's gonna be a strong bond to this skin. On this side, it's not gonna be all that awesome because it's like a vertical wall here almost, but I will get glue on both edges where it touches down on the inside here. So that's gonna be my solution for that. And this kind of gets filled up, this nose area, with epoxy just from this little area. Yeah, and that's that. I'm gonna go over some of this where I got epoxy on some of this stuff and just scuff it down so it's dry and fresh. And then I'll bond prep all of the areas around the perimeter of both tools, trailing edge and all that, and then plus wherever the spars land, I'll bond prep, I'll sand all that out. And I'm going to test fit the tools. I'm gonna close them up dry, just like they are now, after I smooth out the flanges. Before I do anything, I'm just gonna try to close the tools up and see if they close up all the way. If they do, that's great, but they probably won't. There'll probably be something somewhere that hits. Hopefully not, but if there is, it's probably gonna be like right in here. I don't think anything's gonna touch. It shouldn't, and if it does, it's bad because I don't want to sand through this shear web. Well, this is where everything went downhill for me. Pretty disappointed with how the closeout went, honestly. Will I have a flyable plane? Yes, but a lot of things went wrong, and I learned a ton from the process, what not to do for next time, but yeah, I wish I could do it over, and maybe I will. But nonetheless, basically what happened was that I tried to use, I have a structural epoxy that uses a cartridge system. That structural epoxy has a really short open time. It starts to blush and you need to get closed out like in about 20 minutes or so. I'm used to using a piping bag for these planes, and I take my time and I can make real nice clean beads of different sizes however I need them. With the pneumatic gun that I was using, it was very hard to control, and making a quick adjustment on the fly, lowering the pressure essentially to make a smaller bead, was very challenging considering I didn't have a lot of time. So it was like panic mode. After about 20 minutes, I was only 2/3 done, and I was just panicked. And so I just kept like trying to hurry, but I made a serious mess of it. I put too much epoxy in places that didn't need it. Yeah, it's just all bad. So also there was a lot of stuff interfering. For the most part, the spar, it fit good. I think the 60 thou obviously was a little bit too aggressive. I should have tried to go more like 100 thou or so. And then the rear spar and the control surface, like the closeout for that, I totally messed those up. I think that I probably messed up the process of scaling those down, because I had to sand pretty much 60 thousandths off the top of each one, which made me lose. I lost the top of that carbon sock that was pulled over them. It still has the sides, which are, the part that's actually working, but at the top edge, it doesn't have that wraparound and bond as well, to the bottom skin. So nothing I could do. The other thing is, during like this build, I just kept asking and thinking about like the loads on this plane, and there's hardly any bending load on this plane, and I've had a hard time wrapping my head around that. But I do feel like the spar is just way overbuilt, even though I try to make it light compared to the spars I normally make. Less spar cap, lighter shear web, all that. It's still like way overbuilt. So I feel like if I built another one of these, I may use the structural epoxy on the leading edge and potentially the trailing edge, but all the internals, I would change it up, and I would mix up a batch of MGS. Probably I'll thicken it and pipe it in and take my time. I think I could shave a pound of weight off of this empty airframe, and keep it just as stiff and torsion. So anyhow, lesson learned. I'll still get this thing together and make it fly, but didn't go my way yesterday. So I'm going to clean up these flanges for the closeout. I'm not too worried about slicing into this flange. I don't need to do it on this one, but sometimes I might. I typically put a layer of wax on this flange right before I close it out. It'll help with, like, in case I get some sanding scratches in here from doing this process, or if I decide I want to just razor score and just peel everything off at once. I put it in there and the epoxy doesn't stick in there. And I've made many parts out of molds like this, even though I'm rough on them and slice the edges up and everything. It doesn't like compromise. It's still a flat surface, all said and done. Sometimes I use tape to clean, if I want to clean all this, like on the trailing edge of the other mold, I'll just stick a piece of like box tape, I think works the best actually. Stick that onto the paint and then peel it off. So when I'm done with this mold, or when I'm done making this part, I use box tape to clean the all the paint, the residual paint off the molds. It's like for me, it's the best thing that I've found that takes this paint off the mold, is just to use clear box tape, stick it down real good, and then peel it off, and it just peels all the paint off. And that's how I clean it. I think one of the biggest benefits to using the clear tape for cleanup is that it doesn't make a huge mess. I'm sure some of you experienced, cleaning of all the residual paint off the molds with compressed air or whatever, and it just goes everywhere. There's flakes of paint everywhere. It breaks up into little pieces, and it's just a mess. Where when you use the clear box tape, all the paint that comes off the tool is stuck to the tape, so it's super clean, and it allows you to just keep moving forward instead of having to clean up a big old mess afterwards. On these little areas here where I remove the tape with this razor blade, I'll go and put wax on in those areas so epoxy doesn't stick into where I made the cuts. And then when I prep the tool for another part, I'll lightly sand that with 320 or 400 and then wax it again. And I found that, the molds last for years like that. And so I used to be super concerned about, I don't want to mess up my tool. But I save a ton of time, and it's just easier for me to do that and not worry necessarily about how perfect the flange of my tool is. As long as it's flat and does its job, it could be a little bit, scratched up or cut up. You almost can't see it either when it's done and you re-wax it and everything. So it's no big deal to me. All right, I've got some 320. I'll get a little sanding pad. 320. So I'll have to go in by hand on some spots. All right, so I'm right in here. You can see the carbon is starting to fade away a little bit. Just make sure I'm keeping the block flat on here. If I really get focused on here and I'm trying to work that down and I raise the block up, I'll just burn through. So keeping it flat on here helps me not burn through. And you can see it's getting lighter. Getting closer. So now you're starting to be able to see a straight line where the fiberglass edge is. And I can decide to go more or less if I want. But you run the risk of burning through. And it's starting to look really white, and it could be paint. I think I'm into some white paint there. So I was kind of looking past the edge down here a little bit, but I think I'm totally done here. I can tell that I've got through the glass into the white paint. So I'm gonna stop here and I'll work my way around it's a weird edge because there's not like a bunch of carbon. If there's a bunch of carbon, it's easier to read, and you can tell for sure that the edge is clear. But this one, it only has little hairs sticking up, and so there's still like little voids that are down below the parting line, and so it's making it to where I just wanted to keep sanding until that looks perfectly straight. But in reality, it's flat here. So I'll continue working my way around. So here's the lower tool, and I finished this edge. There was some carbon up on here in various spots, and especially out at the wingtip, there was a bit of carbon there. And if you look here, right at the trailing edge of the, not where the carbon ends, but the trailing edge of the wing, if you can make it that little ridge, if you look closely, you can see I got into some white paint there where I burned through the fiberglass, and you can see a bright white area, and that is paint. So had I continued there, it would have got into the tool, or I would have exposed. It doesn't scratch the tool. It basically, once the paint gets thin enough, it just chips away, flakes away, and all of a sudden you're looking at the mold surface. So that's the thing. And then here, as you can see, when I start sanding, some of the surface texture starts popping up in the fiberglass, and so ideally you want to try to get majority of that out. Here's a little time lapse of me doing a wingtip area. I try to do all of this flange sanding with a small block, but there's a lot of contour right here in the tool, and so it forced me to have to go in with a little pad to clean it up the rest of the way. But this will give you an idea of the process of how it looked before and after. With all the focus on getting that parting line cleaned up, it's easy to overlook the outer flange area. So I need to go back always and check, because sometimes there's texture and things like that on the outer edge where some of the breather or the peel ply may have finished up, and there may be resin ridges or something. So once I have everything clean, I get out the wax and I'll go around the tools, making sure I'm staying as far away as possible of the actual parting line. So I'm just going around and just showing the finished flange I've done here. There's still a little bit of carbon, but this particular area, that's below. The wing is up forward, right? That's just like extra material hanging off the back of the wing. And you can see I've cleared all of the paint on the area that's going to mate up with the step that's in the upper tool. And so this is finished, and it has a coat of wax on it. Here's the upper tool, and you can see that there's still a little bit of carbon hairs here and there. You can't feel them with your hand, and I probably started to see paint. So you got to choose your battles here. You want it to look perfect, but you can't get everything all the time. And then, so I cleaned the top of this thing off. I think I sanded it. I scuffed it to get any little bits of resin off of it. And it has a coat of wax on it as well. So, completed flanges. Once I have the flanges cleaned up, it's time to do like a dry check. Notice this flip here happening. Went relatively smooth, and I can get that thing flipped pretty easily now. So I just wanted to test fit everything, and things did not go as planned here. I had a ton of sanding to do. It took me several hours, like 3 or 4 hours, I think, to get it to where it cleared. So the process I use is, if I'm having an area that needs sanding or that's interfering, I'll stick some tape on the tool that's suspended over the top there. I'll put tape in where all the webs land, and then I'll do a light scuff on the tops of everything. And then when I close them out, and when I close the mold up and then lift it back apart, I can look up under there and see where the carbon dust has made imprints on the tape up above. And so I know which areas I need to sand on. And this went on for hours because those rear webs were way too tall and it was a nightmare. So I got the tools where it seemed like they were closing well enough. Next step was to put some tape down. I put this clay everywhere. I put the long rolls of tape across the shear web. That way I can see if the glue gap varies in thickness across the width. And then I put this clear box tape over the top of it. Try not to disturb it, just kind of over it so it doesn't end up sticking to the bottom tool that I closed down on it. So here's what it looked like when I pulled the tools apart. And these tools were pinned and clamped tight. And so it gives me an idea how much epoxy I need for different areas to get it closed. But then I noticed that I actually had really touched down hard in a few spots. Still, this dreaded rear spar and flap closeout is just killing me. So I had to go back to work on those and get those cleared. You see the trailing edge of that one. And anyway, it wasn't over. I thought it was over and it wasn't. So I had to go back in and sand those a little bit more before I could do the closeout. Look at trailing edge of that one. Here I'm kind of circling various places, but when it ends up being like a big long area like that, I'll just scribble across the whole tape. That way, from there, I'll remove all of the tape on the entire mold, tape and clay, and get it completely out of there, except for the areas that I need to sand. I'll slice the tape so I can leave those areas like that for last, and then I'll go in and sand them to finish it up. Well, once all that sanding was done, I cleaned everything up. I bond prepped the perimeter, and I bond prepped the opposing tools perimeter and all of the spots where all these spars land. You can see I had to sand a bit at the center there. Kind of, it bothered me, but there's nothing I could have done. And I've got wiring in there for my servos and battery receiver. This is the those little tubes I put in the leading edge to try to help tie the top and bottom skins together. So I'm wetting these out with epoxy and wiping up any excess resin. Make sure they're fully wetted out with epoxy first before I go on to the thickened structural epoxy. So this is where things got ugly. I normally don't like brush down these beads, but I put these beads down on this lower tool that gets flipped, and they were just sloppy. That gun is heavy, and it was hard for me to get a nice, straight, even bead. And so I had to kind of go back with a brush and kind of even them out, smooth them out. So that's what I did. I did the flip, and then started with the lower, and time just kept flying by, and it is hard for me to get like a real accurate thin bead on some of the small webs, and I guess I didn't think that through enough. Definitely will use the method that I'm good at for the next one. But nonetheless, I got it together. I got it closed out. I didn't get excellent video of that, but I'm sharing with you what I have. There are a couple spots I'm concerned about, which is a ton of epoxy in the wingtips. I hope I didn't squeeze too much out in the hinge area. It's nothing I can't fix or work out, but it's just quite ugly to me. And then there's a small spot on the spar on the right side over there where the battery's going to go. It's just a thin bead of epoxy. It needed a little bit more epoxy there. Of course, I got like probably 3 times as much as I need everywhere else. So there were a couple cut lines. I forgot to put small beads of epoxy in the control surfaces, so I'm gonna have to fill those once I cut those open. And you know, nothing I can do about it except for fix it on the next one. Got it closed up. It's all the video I had. And we'll get to demolding and trimming this thing.